So as many questions as we can possibly get through, and then everybody can hopefully go away feeling that much more informed about what the plans for the Teddington Water Abstraction Scheme are. Some small bits of housekeeping. We are not scheduled to have a fire alarm today, so if you do hear the fire alarm, please make sure that you leave the building. Fire exits are here. However, you may be also feeling it's quite hot in this room already, the capacity ground. Please don't push the doors open, because the power will go out entirely. And we'll all be fumbling around in the dark, and I'd rather that the council doesn't get sued. So if we can try to avoid doing that, that would be very much appreciated. And if we can try and keep everything as decorous as we possibly can, you know, shouting out, booing, hissing, jeering, all of that, which is great fun if you're watching the panto up the road to Richmond Theatre, but not so much fun in here. So if we can try and keep it, you know, at least a bit light, that would be nice. We have Thames Water joining us by Zoom or Teams or whatever the platform is. Thames Water, can you hear us in the internet?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Excellent, excellent. We're also joined by Munira, our MP. We're joined by representatives from Save Our Lands and River. We're joined by Councillor Julia Neden-Watts. We've also got Paul Chadwick, who is one of our officers on the council. They will all introduce themselves in due course. What we are going to do is we're going to have some presentations from each of the, well, most of the speakers actually, not all of them. We're going to have some presentations, and then we will go into the question and answer session. We will have a roving mic, which will be doing the rounds. Unfortunately, because of the individual setup of this particular room, the roving mic has got its own individual speaker that goes with it. It won't be booming out through these massive speakers on the wall. So I will then repeat the question, and then we will ask the person to answer it. Does that all make sense? I was asked, is everybody happy? But I know the answer to that one. Anyway, right. Thames Water. Would you like to... Thames Water. Would you like to introduce yourselves and give your presentation?
Yes, of course. Good evening. Can you hear us and can you see us?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So, good evening. And thank you very much for inviting us to be part of your community conversation. So we're getting a little bit of feedback in the room, so apologies if it feels a bit echoey your side, but we'll do our best. So my name is Leonie Dubois. I'm Head of Engagement, Land and Consents for Thames Water. And I just want to thank you for inviting us to be part of your conversation. We're in agreement on that actually divide. We all want to help the river. We all want to have less impact on the environment, and we all want to have a secure, long-term water supply for the future. And that's what the team is set out here to do today. In terms of the team, I'd like to introduce them. I have Rob Bromley, who's the project manager of the London Water Project. I have Rob Hinks, who's the environmental manager for the project. I also have Connor Lockley, who many of you I'm sure will have met previously. Connor is the dedicated local engagement manager for the project. We also have Peter Blair, who's part of the Water Resources Management Plan team. He's responsible for setting out that management plan, which sets out the secure water supply. And finally, we're joined by Phil Stride, who for many years was responsible for the Thames Tideway Tunnel project. Is part of the project here as a strategic engagement advisor. I brought the team here today to hopefully answer as many questions as you have, and obviously they cover lots of different specialisms, so I'm hoping we'll be able to answer as many questions tonight. But I think it's really important that we set out from the beginning why this project is important. We know that we have a shortage of water, and we know that in the southeast we're in a particularly water-stressed environment and we need to do something to plan for the future. We know that a severe drought costs the economy of London and would affect families like mine and also like yours. So it's right that we set out a plan to set out how we're going to secure that water supply. So our Water Resources Management Plan is the place that we do that. It's a statutory document that we have to produce every 5 years and is governed by the Secretary of State for DEFRA. And our plan, I like to think of it, is 2 parts. The first part makes sure that every drop of water that we have at the moment really matters and counts. So the first part of it is to ensure that we improve our performance on leakage. We know that we haven't performed as well as we need to in that space. And the plan sets out that we're going to halve leakage by 2050. And at the moment, we're fixing a leak about once every 10 minutes. We also need to use less water as society. So that myself, yourselves, we need to reduce the amount of water that we use collectively. One of the ways that we can do that is through our smart metering programme, which allows people to understand how much water that they're actually using and then make different decisions about the amount that they use. So it's a hugely important part of the plan. But we know that that's not enough, and we know that we need to invest in new sources of water. Within the plan, there are 2 schemes that we're proposing, one of which is a new reservoir, which is located in Oxfordshire, close to Abingdon, which will provide the bulk of the water that we need. But then there is also the Teddington project, which is the reason why we're all here this evening. Just to be absolutely clear, both of these projects are at a really early stage, and we recognise that it's frustrating for you that we don't have all of the answers at this point, that we can't give you definitive answers to your questions because we haven't yet done the work. But what we know is right is involving people at a very early part of the project so that they can be involved throughout the duration of the development. And this is actually very common for many infrastructure projects. It is an iterative process that will take many years to develop. We're also, and I'm sure many of you in the room are well aware, that we're in consultation at the moment on our site options. That consultation is open until the 11th of December, and we thank those people that have already responded. It's hugely helpful to the process. For those of you who are yet to respond, you can do so by looking on our website, and that will give you a link to fill in the form. We also want to thank those people who've arrived at our information events recently. We've held 4 over the last few weeks, and we welcomed many, many people into the event halls, and I know that they've had very fruitful, very honest conversations. And in the main, that has been very, very respectful, and we thank everybody for taking part in that process. Finally, again, thank you for inviting us to be part of your conversation. I'm going to hand over to Rob Bromley, who's going to talk to you about the project. I think it's really important that we set out the clear facts of the project because we know that there is some misinformation in communities and we wanted to be absolutely clear what this project is all about. So thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Jamie. Good evening, everybody. So I'm going to run through a brief overview of the project. Of course, you can, as Lady said, you can find more information about the project within our consultation documents on the Thames Water website. So the primary purpose of the scheme is to abstract 75 million litres of river water a day during periods of drought. That's when there's prolonged dry weather, when the river flows are low and our reservoir storage levels are low. And that is a period when water is most needed. We would discharge an equal volume of water to balance the abstraction. That discharge will be just downstream of the abstraction point, and that will ensure that the river levels and the flows are maintained in the river. The project would typically operate once every 2 years, and generally between July and October, although in more extreme cases, of more severe droughts, that operation may extend to November and December. We would require an environmental permit to operate, which will set out the triggers for the scheme and the water quality standards that we'd need to meet. We would utilise the latest in tertiary treatment processes to produce the recycled water from the effluent that is currently discharged into the tidal Thames. We would produce cleaner and better quality water than is currently produced. A number of additional treatment processes may be added to the tertiary treatment process to target specific chemicals set by the environmental permit. I want to make it clear to everyone that this project does not discharge sewage into the River Thames. It does not discharge untreated sewage into the River Thames, and there is no physical connection between storm tanks at Mogden and the project pipeline. The recycled water would not cause a deterioration of the water quality of the River Thames, and there'd be nothing in the water, in the recycled water, that would cause the water quality of the River Thames not to improve in the future. Included in the design are a number of fail-safe measures that would ensure that any water that we produce that doesn't meet the required standards is diverted back to Mogden and not into the river. We've had lots of feedback through our consultation and engagement from the local community concerned about the environmental effects of the project. I want to reassure everyone that our investigations, assessments and design development will be thorough, carried out by professional, independent consultants and scrutinised every step of the way. We are committed to preserving and enhancing the local environment and ensure that any potential effects are minimised and mitigated. We are committed to improving the local environment, such as providing significant biodiversity net gain. That could be through things like river restoration and tree planting, and we want to work with the local community to capture long-lasting localising benefits. We're also working closely with the Environment Agency to examine in detail the quality of the recycled water, including its makeup and physical parameters such as temperature. Our early findings indicate there is a low risk of significant environmental impacts. At the heart of this project is the need to provide a resilient water supply to London while ensuring we protect, preserve and enhance the local area and ensure we do not cause those significant environmental impacts. But we cannot demonstrate this or mitigate it, we will not obtain a relevant permit and the scheme will not go ahead. Our concept design recognises concern from the local community about the construction effects. The pipeline will be constructed using a technique that causes the least amount of disruption. There are also opportunities to use river transport to move materials to and from site, thereby limiting the number of HGVs on the local roads. These opportunities will be investigated further, along with a number of other, all with the aim of minimising those localised impacts. Fundamental to the project is the location of the key above-ground structures. The footprint of our construction activities is subject to further design refinement, but our site options have been selected to try and avoid the most biodiverse areas wherever possible. Following construction, land will be reinstated and the permanent surface footprint relatively small. For example, the only surface evidence of our new pipeline when it was built would be a number of small 2 by 2 metre shaft covers covering the 4.5 kilometre pipeline route. We acknowledge that construction of the intake and the outfall will require a bigger area and take longer than for pipeline construction. And we do recognise the potential for longer term disruption and impacts to residents along Burnell Avenue and the surrounding area. Because we're at an early stage in the design and assessment of this project, we still do not fully understand the scale of potential effects or the mitigation required. But as we move through 2024, we will prioritise appraising these effects and developing the design further to minimise those effects. In terms of the next steps, we still have a lot of work to do, as Fiona said. The first thing we need to do is to review all the feedback from our current consultation and confirm our preferred design. We'll then seek an EIA scoping opinion in spring 2024 and consult on the design and the draft impact assessment in early 2025. Subject to ensuring the project would not cause significant environmental effects, we would plan to submit a planning application in the first half of 2026.
Thank you. That's it from Thames Water.
Thank you for that. Now we move on to a presentation from Save Our Lands and River, who are represented up here on the panel. If you'd like to introduce yourselves.
Can you hear me? Oh, God. Yes, you can. I feel very much above the salt here, which is not a place I always am feeling comfortable. Thank you. My name is Alice Lancaster. I'm a Twickenham resident. I am here with the awesome responsibility of speaking with my colleague Ian on behalf of the community campaign that has come together in opposition to the TDRA scheme, a scheme I first heard about just about a month ago when I got this letter through my letterbox saying a scheme was going ahead that would impact my property. So I've been part of the campaign in just that short amount of time. Originally called Save Ham Lands and River, the campaign is now called Save Our Lands and River. And why have we changed the name? Well, because we've expanded. So if you'd like to go to the next slide. We've expanded to include the 30,000 residents that live within the area impacted by the scheme, from Moormead, St Margaret's, through Twickenham, where I live, Ham, Petersham, Teddington, Kingston. And if you look at the next slide, in including the more than 50 community groups, associations and businesses who have worked with our campaign to sign our shared letter of opposition. The 28,000 people or so that have signed our change.org petition, and most importantly, the thousands of people who use our sacred rivers and lands every day. The canoers, the kayakers, the paddleboarders, the swimmers, the football players, the park runners, and like me, the dog walkers. It's really important that you understand that we have learned about this scheme from one another, not from Thames Water. Our WhatsApp channels and our community email groups have lit up with information. And the more we've learned, the more unhappy we've become. Now, we do appreciate this is a complex and challenging issue. Drought resilience is needed, climate change is real, environmental destination decisions have to be made, we understand that. But we do not believe that this scheme is the right scheme. We believe it is fundamentally flawed in 3 areas: environmentally, socially, and financially. We consider ourselves as community organisers to be stewards of the river and the lands for the future. We want to leave the river and the lands in better shape than where we started. I'm going to hand off to my colleague Ian, who's going to step through the reasons why we consider this scheme to be flawed and the alternatives that we call on Thames Water to consider and work with us to bring to fruition. Thank you, Ian.
Thanks, Alice. Next slide. This quote, I'll read it for those at the back that may not be able to. It comes from the Government Water Resources Planning Guidelines. So it's the thing that all water companies have to abide by when they're putting these water resource plans together. And it focuses on an area that is a big theme in Thames Water's plan called the Best Value Plan. And this is what it says. You need to consider factors alongside economic costs to achieve an outcome that increases the overall benefit to customers, the wider environment, and society. So those are the instructions given out by the government. Next slide, please. Thames Water, with its other organisations involved in these plans, have probably put together something around 30,000, more than 30,000 pages actually. In fact, over 32,500 pages. It's more than the last publication of Encyclopaedia Britannica. and it includes a huge volume of detail about how they've constructed this thing called best value. But throughout all of those documents, you cannot find their workings. Best value is made up, as well as economic cost, of a whole range of environmental, social, water resilience. There's somewhere between 15 and 20 factors thrown into an investment model. And out of that investment model, Teddington has emerged from originally 2,400 schemes or projects that were thought of as a preferred best value option. So it's beaten quite a few competitors to get to where it is now. So this best value model is fundamental to what Thames Water is saying as to why it's recommending this particular scheme. Interestingly, I found, for those that are really keen on the reading, in Thames Water's business plan, which is a separate suite of documents, something that says, our decision support tool, this is the best value model, does not automatically select Teddington DRA under each of the scenarios listed above. The scenarios listed above are all around population, demand, environmental destinations, big things that could change. Instead, the model opts for many small schemes and reliance on other companies' leakage reduction. And Thames Water says, we're concerned about the deliverability and resilience risks associated with this, so in the round, we prefer Teddington. So even in their own model, it doesn't necessarily pick Teddington. But the thing we call on Thames Water to do, after months and months of asking, is please publish your workings. Because when I was at school, I got a mark for the answer, but I got most of the marks for showing my workings. And unless the community sees the relative weightings you have put against all these factors, there is no way you have been given sufficient information to come to a fair and reasonable judgment. And certainly, Thames Water has not proved the case. Next slide, please. This scheme is not a water recycling scheme. It is a treated sewage disposal scheme. One of the things Rob, who presented, did not mention was that although it's 75 megalitres of water a day when it's used going in and out, every single day, 365 days of the year, 24 hours a day, I presume, 7 days a week, up to 25% of the capacity of this system will be spilled into the Thames as treated sewage. 2.5 times more treated sewage will come out of this scheme than the water abstracted. So it is not water recycling, and I'll come on to explain why that is the case in a different way when we look at the alternatives. Next slide, please. The environment features very strongly in what is assessed under best value. But Thames Water don't even plan to do the scoping of an environmental assessment until spring 24. So how on earth could they have judged what was right to go into that model? Next slide, please. It's not very often I'm lost for words, but on the social impact assessment, I am lost for words because Thames Water has written no words. Nowhere in all those pages will you find any evidence of social and health impact. And one of the most publicly used highly prized water and land areas in London. Next slide, please. In their customer research, they claim Teddington DRA was supported as a scheme. The only place you can find anything to do with Teddington is a May 23 piece of research where about a quarter of the people in this room gave their views. It's a qualitative bit of research. They led the witness and they did not validly put the views of the community in that. Next slide, please. As far as public consultation is concerned, they have been clear to show what you see is all there is, as opposed to what you need to know and understand to make a fair and reasonable assessment. Next slide. There are many alternatives to this scheme. We've listed them out to Thames Water. There are big schemes like Beckton and Mogden recycling, which is proper recycling. And there are many, many smaller schemes that we're in discussions with Thames Water about. Next slide, please. You may well ask, well, how come, Ian, if it's all so obvious, they haven't picked it? And I'm afraid part of that answer is down to money. £4 on your bill for this scheme, over 30 years with 6.2 million households, means the total cost, if you stand in your shoes, is about £750 million. It's not just the capital cost of building the scheme that you will see Thames Water publish. So, to conclude, it's a flawed scheme. There are many better, greener, lower risk alternatives. They haven't worked hard enough or creatively enough to come up with them. And I'm afraid there's a strong money motivation behind what they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm trying to be slightly lenient on timekeeping. Contrary to what you might have heard, I'm not a monster. So, what we'll be doing now is hearing from Councillor Neden-Watts, who has, what, 5 or so minutes to make her case.
Oh, yes, it's loud, isn't it? I'll be quicker than that. So first of all, yes, Richmond Council is a local planning authority. It's a role we take very seriously. I'll leave... Can someone... It's the leader's fault. I've said that before. So I'll let Mr. Chadwick, who's the Director of the Environment, touch on some of the planning possibilities that are in front of us. We do know that whatever happens in terms of planning, there'll be further statutory consultations. And I don't need to encourage you to get involved and participate and give your views in those in the appropriate way. In terms of the impact upon the borough, Moormead in St Margaret's is one area where residents and ward councillors are extremely concerned about the construction impacts of the proposed tunnelling and shafts. And Hamlands is another. It's an important site for nature conservation, of great interest for its flora, its invertebrates, its songbirds. I won't get away without mentioning the hairy pea and the yellow vetchling. It's worth noting that Richmond Council has very robust policies in place to protect our parks and biodiversity. And there are policies in the London Plan and the National Planning Policy Framework which afford protection to open land and green spaces. And any application that comes forward will have to be assessed in the proper way against that planning framework. The Council also has a role as landowner, and in that capacity, I think it's fair to say, as the Council's lead member for Environment and Sustainability, in the borough, which has one of the strongest biodiversity action plans in London and 2 ecologists, so we do know what we're talking about. We have very serious concerns indeed about some of the potential impacts of the proposed scheme on our parks and the wider environment. I'm dismayed to contemplate the potentially irreversible damage that could be done to unique habitats in Ham. Thames have spoken of reinstatement and mitigation, and of course that's right, but in some cases, where there is a unique habitat, reinstatement simply isn't possible, so we need to think about that very carefully indeed. I'm equally dismayed at the potential disruption to the use that's made of Moormead as a recreation ground, day in, day out. It's used by members of the public for sports, for dog walking, general recreation and play, as well as by schools for sports lessons and nature visits. I'm aware of time moving on, so I would emphasise that Thames Water simply must listen to communities from whom we've heard so resoundingly, the swimmers, the rowers, the anglers, and everyone who values recreation, exercise and biodiversity, and the concerns about the potential impacts of this scheme, not just on sensitive nature sites, but on water quality. And we've heard that the EA will be involved in examining the quality of that, but that suggests to me that it hasn't yet happened, and that is a concern. And this is all, of course, in the context of sewage that is already spilt into our rivers, and a failure to fix leaks that are already happening, spectacularly in some cases, as at Manor Circus. More recently, we've had residents getting in touch with us, very worried, sharing their anxiety about proposed tunnelling under their properties, and those concerns also need to be addressed. So explanations and justifications for this scheme that we've heard, they do feel awkward, very much focused on efforts to explain that this is a best value rather than the least cost scheme, when the true costs, the social and environmental costs, as well as the financial costs, have not yet been clearly assessed. So in summary, it's the Council's position, as set out in the motion that we brought to full Council in October, that in these circumstances, Thames Water should re-examine more appropriate and better supported schemes, paying great heed, especially to the apparently uncosted environmental and social impacts of what they're seeking to deliver here. Thanks.
Thank you. Final speaker this evening before we move into questions is Munira MP, Member of Parliament for Twickenham.
Thank you, Gareth, and thank you to the Council for organising this community conversation, for all the panellists for taking part, and most of all to the hundreds of you who are here in person, as well as the many hundreds watching online at home. The level of interest in this meeting and the level of correspondence in my inbox is testament to the passion and the strength of feeling across our community about this proposal. And ever since this proposal first came to light at the beginning of the year, as your local MP, I have been trying my best to challenge and question it on your behalf. And we've heard today from Ian and Alice and from Julia what some of those key concerns are, and that strength of feeling has only been building since January. So initially, I'd say that feeling and the concern focused on the environmental and the human health impacts of the treated sewage that will be put back into the water. And since then, as the potential route of the tunnel and the shafts has become clearer, there is an immense strength of feeling about the construction impacts on our precious green spaces such as Moormead Park and Ham Lands, as we've already heard today, the recreation and sports use on Moormead Park, the ecological impact of Ham Lands. And I'd say initially my concern was mainly around Thames Water's engagement and communication on this project, which I felt and my neighbouring colleague Sarah Olney MP, whose constituency contains Ham Lands and therefore is also very impacted by this, we both felt very strongly that that consultation and engagement was inadequate, and I'm grateful that Thames Water at our request put on additional consultation events between January and March of this year on the Water Resources Management Plan that they initially consulted on, and held meetings that we tried to facilitate with stakeholder groups, a couple of which we've had this year. As well as obviously the construction and the environmental impacts, we've heard from Alice about homeowners who are concerned about the impact of potential tunnel going underneath their homes. But what I would say about the response to the initial consultation on the Water Resources Management Plan Many hundreds of you responded. In fact, of the 1,700 responses that Thames Water received, over a third specifically referenced the Teddington DRA and were largely opposed to it. So there is a very valid question here tonight, and amongst many thousands of local residents, is why are we here talking about where this pipe and the shafts should go when the community has very, very clearly said, no, thank you. And one of the things I want to stress, because I have had this charge levelled at me both by ministers, by some local residents, and indeed by Thames Water, is that wherever they put a scheme, there will be opposition. So effectively, we're all NIMBYs. We don't want this in our backyard. And I want to very clearly say that that is not the case. I think we all recognise, as Ian has laid out, that there are the impacts of climate change, population growth, and water usage in general going up, that we need to ensure that there is water resilience. The question is whether this is the right scheme to pursue. And when you've got even the Environment Agency at this stage questioning whether this is a feasible and environmentally acceptable project, when you've got huge questions about best value for who? The Water Resources Management Plan consultation, Thames Water's response to that went to ministers at the end of August. It's one of the options they looked at was a scheme called the Severn Thames Transfer. That actually does have wider popular support, but that has been deprioritised because of what Ian laid out, because of best value considerations. We know that Thames Water, indeed as many other water companies, has failed to invest for decades in infrastructure, whilst taking out dividends for shareholders and bonuses for executives, when they should have been investing in infrastructure. The reason they've settled on this scheme, in my view, is because it is the quickest option and the cheapest option, and not necessarily the best environmental option and the most socially acceptable option. So what have I done on your behalf? Well, as well as engaging with Thames Water to try and ask them to listen and engage with you better, I have taken this to ministers, because ministers 100% have a role to play in this. I mentioned the Water Resources Management Plan, of which the Teddington DRA is one option, was presented to the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs at the end of August. At the beginning of September, when Parliament returned after the summer recess, I secured a debate with the Water Minister, who had refused to meet me and my colleague Sarah Olney MP to discuss the scheme, so I secured a debate with her to try and get some answers from her. Those of you who watched it will know that I got precious few answers on the scheme itself, but one thing she did make clear is that ministers in the coming weeks, she said later this year, and they've not yet taken the decision, have the power to either accept the options in the Water Resources Management Plan that's been presented to them, to amend those proposals, or to call for an inquiry. And in that debate, I said to her very clearly, you need to veto this option, i.e. amend that plan, or if she wants, she can call an inquiry, but I've asked for a veto on that proposal. Now, I have a meeting with the new Water Minister, because it's a different one, there's been a bit of churn in government, in a couple of weeks' time, to put the case again on your behalf, and Sarah Olney and I will be strongly making that case to veto this plan. I also have a meeting with our London Assembly member Hina Bakari on Friday with the Thames Water Chief Executive at Mogden to discuss this, and Sarah Olney and I are also accompanying the head of the Environment Agency down to Hamlands just before Christmas to talk to him about the scheme, because the Environment Agency, as we've heard, the jury's still out for them. So I will continue to engage. My one request of you, if you haven't already done so, or two requests, if you haven't already done so, please do respond to the Thames Water consultation. But I've also got a paper petition here today. I know you've all signed lots of online petitions, but our antiquated Parliament, if I want to present something in Parliament for a formal response from DEFRA, I need some hard copy signatures in the salon. I'm running the petition at the back. Please do sign up to that. I will present that on your behalf and continue to keep up the pressure so that I can keep up the pressure on your behalf, because if Thames Water won't take this off the table, we can ask government ministers to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're about to go into all of the full fun and games of questions from the floor. But you may have noticed we have Paul Chadwick, who is sitting there. Paul is our Director for the Environment. He's here to assist with any technical questions which we may have about council policy, about planning policy, and things like that. So that's who that is. Before we go into questions, just to satisfy my own curiosity, this will be people who will identify on the Twickenham side of the river, and those people who identify as being on the Richmond or Ham side of the river. So, quick show of hands, just so I know what we're dealing with. Twickenham side of the river people. Okay. And Ham stroke Richmond. Okay, so predominantly Twickenham for this one. Excellent. That's useful stuff to know about. Right, so we're going to have a roving mic doing the rounds. Where's my roving mic? Hello. So what we're going to do, so let's see an initial show of hands, and I'm going to regret this. Let's see an initial show of hands of people who wish to ask a question. Okay, what I'm going to do to try and keep it fair around all the bits. So there's a gentleman right at the very back who wishes to ask a question. Now, as I mentioned earlier, questions, preferably short ones, are preferred to speeches. And then I will reiterate for the benefit of the table. I'm afraid we really can't hear you. You must sort of project as much as you can into the microphone.
I'll stand up. It's a question for Thames Water, and the question is, first of all, I just want to say, I'm really sorry you're not here to answer our questions in person, which I think is actually quite discourteous to us as a community. But what I'd like to ask is, what research have you done yourselves to investigate what would be the effect of the tunnelling on properties that are going as a part of the tunnelling with the thinking case?
Excellent. I can answer. So this is a question for Thames. I don't know why I feel the need to look at the screen, but there we are. This is a question for Thames Water. First and foremost, the gentleman expressed dissatisfaction by the fact that you weren't able to be here tonight in person, suggested it was quite discourteous. However, the question he asks is, what studies have you made regarding the potential impact for the drilling and the tunnelling which is going to be going on underneath people's houses in order to deliver this scheme? That right? Yeah, thumbs up.
Okay, Rob.
Yeah, hi. So, as we said in the presentation, we still need to do a lot more work in terms of understanding the environmental effects. And we're currently at the stage where we have a load of site options, and that's what we're consulting upon. Once we get our preferred design, then we are able then to scope the work that we need to do with the local authorities and the planning inspectorate, and then we can then go away and start doing that impact assessment. We will hold a further consultation in early 2025, which will then set out those preliminary environmental impacts and the mitigation measures and the final preferred design that we would like to take forward to consenting. So in terms of the work that's been done today, apart from the future work, it's all being done as a high level risk assessment aspect at the moment.
I think the other thing that's important to add is about the ground investigation programme that we would need to undertake, which allows us to establish what the current ground conditions are. So Rob, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that, because it's particularly about tunnelling.
Yes.
The gentleman was interested.
Yes, so as part of our further environmental work next year, we plan to do some ground investigations at the preferred shaft sites to understand what's in the ground. We're aware of the kind of historic reuse of some of the land that we've identified as our options. We need to understand what material, what the ground conditions are like to be able to undertake those assessments. So, as I say, once we've confirmed which sites we want to use for the project, then we'll undertake that GI to provide that information to then allow us to do that impact assessment.
Okay. First question done. First question dusted. Now hang on. I'm sorry to press on this one, Thames Water. The mood in the hall is perhaps there wasn't the fullest answer that could have been given. Is there any further that you might be able to add?
About tunnelling in particular?
About tunnelling in particular? The research in particular on the tunnelling. What research, what studies, what gives you confidence to think that this is going to be good?
Well, I mean, as I mentioned in the presentation earlier, and also mentioned in the consultation documents, our preferred technique of tunnelling would be something called pipe jacking, which is something that's done at depth, 20 to 30 metres down. It's quite a common technique. It's used commonly across London to tunnel under urban areas. So there's a lot of evidence out in the public domain about that technique, and a lot of evidence that shows there are very minimal, very small risks of surface impacts. The majority of the time that the tunnelling technique is used, we don't know that it's being undertaken because it's done at quite considerable depth. So that's the evidence, the work that's been done to inform the concept design. But as I said earlier, there's a lot more still to be done. But we are confident in the technique, and we are confident in the very low risk of environmental impact of that process.
Okie dokie. We're going to take another question. I think if we can come to this quadrant here. So, that gentleman there.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes. Thank you. Stephen Alexander, St Margaret's Association of Residents. We don't appear on the list, but I can assure you we're there. I have a couple of questions, one to the Council, one to Thames Water. To Thames Water, is there no other method of tunnelling apart from pipe jacking, and whether it's cheap? There aren't too many access shafts in the middle of the channel, because it was drilled in a different way. Could we not do it that way? And secondly, to the Council, I know that this will probably go to the Secretary of State for permission, but is there the equivalent of a Section 106? In other words, does Thames Water have to produce some money to grease the Council's palm?
My palms don't get greased. So, Thames Water, what's the alternative to pipe jacking?
Yes, there are a number of alternatives to pipe jacking. I mean, firstly, we could do a much more kind of invasive technique of open cut trenching, which is done quite shallow, but obviously that causes a huge amount of disruption. Not generally done in urban areas. That's mainly a technique that's used in rural areas. We certainly wouldn't advocate that technique, that process here for the scheme. We could bore bigger tunnels using tunnel boring machines, similar to maybe what they might have used on the Thames Tideway Tunnel project. But there's a balance between the size of your tunnelling and the amount of material that then needs to be excavated. And obviously, the bigger the tunnel you bore, the more material needs to come out, therefore the more material you need to remove from the site, so the more HGVs on the roads, etc. So whereas you might have an advantage of a bigger diameter bore with less surface shaft sites, if we were going to go with a 3.5 metre tunnel diameter, you might be looking at 200, 250 times more HGVs on the road. So what we've currently got in our concept design of pipe jacking 1.8 internal diameter pipe is that kind of nice balance between minimising the number of shaft sites as much as possible, minimising the amount of material that needs to be excavated from site, but also obviously being of adequate size to allow 75 million litres of water to be discharged through it to the river.
How about micro-tunneling?
How about what?
Micro-tunneling.
Oh, a lady from the floor, if we can avoid shouting out. A lady from the floor has asked, what about micro-tunnelling?
Sorry, we didn't quite hear that. Can you just repeat it?
Somebody has asked, what about micro-tunnelling?
Again, it's probably another technique. We'll have to get back to you on that one because there's a whole tranche of different techniques that are possible potentially. The current concept design is what we have, where we do feel that results in the smallest amount of impact.
Okay.
This is what this consultation is all about, isn't it? What really is about understanding are there other opportunities. So if there are good ideas, please respond to the consultation. We'll definitely.
Yeah. Thank you. Paul Chadwick is going to address the issue of recompense to the council.
Well, thank you. So actually, I was intending to be here more as a representative of the council as landowner, supporting Julia in that. But so you need to know I'm not a planner, but I do manage the planning team, so I know something of it. So first of all, I'd say around the tunnelling, of course, the planning process will have regard to the options coming forward from Thames about that. They'll be poring over those thoughts wherever they land, and will worry, the planners will worry, like you worry, about those issues you've raised. What I would say, of course, is that there are schemes that do have dug below residential homes in London. Your planners will experience some of them, including work with Crossrail 2, work with Battersea Power Station, and work with Thames Tideway Tunnel. So, you know, technically it is possible. Just, you know, I need to add that a caution really, that it is technically possible usually, but the planners will pour over the detail. And what I would say is that costs vary enormously depending on ground conditions. So whatever Thames are thinking right now in terms of their costs, and it builds into your comment about viability earlier, those costs may rise significantly if the ground conditions through their intensive surveys prove more problematic than first thought. In terms of section 1, well, first of all, in terms of on planning, pure planning, in terms of process, it's not landed yet whether this, I don't think Thames have landed their view on this yet, whether this application due in early 26 would follow a direct to national government route through this, through what's called a development consent order approach, which was followed for the Thames Tideway Tunnel, for example, as a scheme of national significance. It's not, we're not convinced as a planning authority that it meets that threshold of being a nationally significant scheme, so it may, and I think we would hope that it would come direct to the local planning authority first, so that local councillors, local officers can have a very direct input into the process. Whichever route though, whether it were through first the local planning authority or first the government, yes, there is a section 106 process which can help in any type of scheme to mitigate the direct impact of that scheme on the local environment. It has to be a very direct link though, it's not, what was your term, Gareth? It's not palm greasing. It can't possibly be that, and it won't be that. But what I would stress is that we're a long way from any kind of negotiation on that. You know, the council's landowner, first of all, like you, all of you as landowners, well, many of you as landowners, is at the first base of wondering why on earth a scheme is necessary, and if there is a scheme that's necessary, why this scheme? So we're an awful long way away from any discussion, be it with the landowner or the planning authority on mitigation.
Okay, Ian's indicated he'd like to come in.
Can I just add one thing in terms of the campaign's current understanding of this?
I switched off.
Yeah. Current understanding of this question of which planning route. And maybe our Thames Water colleagues can confirm this. Our understanding is that they have written to the planning inspectorate to ask about going through the centralised route. So I think I've got that right. My Thames Water colleagues can correct me if I've got it wrong, but that is my understanding, and that answer was given to a resident at one of the recent information events.
Thank you for that. This segment here, we've not had any women's questions yet. Here we go. About what Ian asked, Thames Water. Have you come to any informed choice about which route you'd prefer to go down? Whether it would be the Secretary of State full public inquiry thing, or the local planning route?
Yeah. Ian is right. We would prefer to take this project for a development consent order. And we have written to DEFRA to request that, because we do believe that the project is a nationally significant infrastructure project. Saying that, obviously it's not our decision to give us what's called a Section 35. So as we've said publicly before, we are twin tracking this project, so we are meeting the requirements of both planning routes in the early stages, and will continue to do so until we hear in the new year decision is on national significance of the project.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Ellie Greenwood. I'm the Club Welfare Officer for Moormead Football Club. We were founded in 2011. We were based in Moormead Park, and we're still based there. We have 263 registered players playing in 18 teams in local football leagues. We have 140 reception to Year 3 age children who play at Moormead Park every Saturday morning. And I know that our neighbours at Twickenham Saints Football Club and Moormead Cricket Club could give you their own statistics of the many hundreds of children doing sport in Moormead Park every week. Please can you tell me why you haven't engaged with any of these clubs to date, even though this is at such an early stage? And also how on earth you would propose to mitigate the social benefits of displacing that activity when we know how short we are already on pitch facilities in the local area. Thank you.
Over to you, Thames.
Okay, thank you so much for attending the meeting and setting out the situation at Moormead Park. We understand that it is a really very well used facility, and just to be absolutely clear, we want to keep impact there to an absolute minimum. In terms of consultation and engagement, at an early stage of a project, it's really difficult to understand all of the different users of all of the different pieces of land. But as the project continues to evolve, we get people like yourselves as part of our key stakeholder list, and we'll make sure that you're informed going forward. I know that we'll take an action from the room today that Connor, who I introduced you to earlier on, will be in touch after the meeting to arrange a session with yourselves so that we can talk through your individual situation and really understand that. One of the things that we would obviously look to do is how can we provide that provision during the period of construction? How can we avoid certain times of the year when that facility is most heavily used? So there's a really long way to go yet before we understand exactly how we can resolve that situation. But thank you for coming forward this evening.
Thank you. Anybody from the panel have anything which they wish to add? Paul?
Yes, so exactly your points are going to be made by your council's representatives at a landowning session with Thames, and there'll be no doubt many sessions of its time to come. Because of course, in terms of parks and open spaces affected by the shafts, by the abstraction points, etc., there are manifold sites there within council's ownership. So myself, Julia, our parks team, our leisure assistant director who is responsible for the delivery of our leisure strategy, for the delivery of our playing pig strategy, will all be there making exactly those points, because we, our concerns are deep felt, like yours are, about those impacts, long and medium term, on those sites.
Julie?
Thanks. I just want to express my own frustration at this point that, having had several rounds of engagement with Thames Water on these, I know that the point about Moormead and how much it's used for football has been made many times, and all the other uses of Moormead. I just think this speaks to the value of this meeting and the value of your preparing a question on this subject so that we can put that again. And as Paul has said, I'll be in that meeting with him when we meet Thames Water representatives to explain our position as landowner, just to make sure, in case they haven't heard it this time around, that they will take into account that and all the other things we're saying. We just have to keep saying them until they're heard.
Thank you. Thank you. Just one supplementary from me, if I may, regarding the construction at Moormead. Roughly how long would you be considering the construction phase at Moormead to be taken? I appreciate it's difficult to be precise, but sort of ballpark?
I mean, ballpark is approximately 6 months. We think it will take around 8 weeks to build the shaft and use the snake, and then we think it will take between 14 and 100 days to make the tunnel bore from the shaft through the next shaft. So that's generally typically what we're looking at as a duration.
Okay, thank you. You just heard moments ago, I'm going to be moving up here for the questions, that there's going to be a landowner meeting with ward councillors. There are ward councillors here today, representing St Margaret's, Ham. They keep wanting me to let them ask a question, and I'm not going to let them, because we want to hear from you. There we go, the voice of youth. There we go.
As the only under 18 in attendance, I want to get my point across on behalf of all the young people living specifically around Moormead. Many people use this place, and I know it's already been touched upon, for football, cricket, even the schools use it, including St Stephen's and St Richard Reynolds. The space is also used as a recreational ground for many young people as well. I want to know where you expect them to go in this prolonged period of time that you will be using the park for waterworks.
Okay, so you heard the question. Where do you expect them to go?
I know that's not easy to do, and unfortunately we can't see the room, so I can't look at you directly, but to say thank you for coming this evening. Hearing younger voices is hugely important as part of this process, and it would be really helpful if you're happy and you're prepared to do is to meet with Connor and even myself and to talk through your thoughts and feelings about the space that you use, because we really want to hear about them. As we said previously, we hope that the impact there isn't for that long a time. And one of the things that we want to do is work on what could we do to obviously recompense the use of that playground area. And that's something that we'd like your huge involvement in if you're prepared to do so.
Okay. Again, I think I just need to press ever so slightly, because the question was where you may be thinking of decanting people to.
So that's not decided yet. That's not something that we've started to look at yet. Obviously, together with yourselves as the local authority and the local users of that, we need to establish what that will be. But there's still a really long way to go on this project before those sorts of things are decided. And I know we keep saying we're at an early stage, and I know that's frustrating. But that's actually the situation we find ourselves in, and these things take time. We're at the start of the process and we're absolutely committed to be working with you to try and find those solutions.
Thank you. Okay, we've heard a lot from people on the Twickenham side. I'm moving up to the cheap seats right in the outer room. Are there any people from Richmond, not you, Councillor Jorrings, are there any people from Richmond who wish to ask a question in this part of the room? Ooh. Don't go beyond the seal. No. Okay. How about Richmond and Ham on this side of the... I know, I'm trying to do a sweep around the room, because then we can try and keep everything fair. So, anybody on Richmond from this side?
Behind you.
Oh, for God's sake. Here we go. You'll need to come out, otherwise we're going to make a hell of a... James Chard, you're okay? Oh, no. Otherwise the reverb comes out and we won't hear you. Here we go.
Hello, I'm not from Richmond, but I'm from this part of the room, so I hope I can still ask my question. So my question is to Thames Water. You say that the project should be nature positive. I wonder whether you can help me to quantify the negative impacts on biodiversity and then give me an idea about how you want to take action to remedy them. Thank you.
Did you catch that?
Unfortunately, we caught bits of it, so if you could repeat it, that would be hugely helpful.
Try again. A bit loud, please.
I understand that the project should be nature positive. I wonder whether you can help me to understand the negative impacts on biodiversity, both the river and its surrounding environment, and then what the positive offsetting actions are considered by Thames Water to make the project in its entirety nature positive. Thank you.
Was that any better?
Thank you, Rob, please.
Yes, thank you. So as part of biodiversity net gain, through our initial appraisals, we've assessed all of the different route options as in terms of shower locations and discharge and abstraction locations, as well as in river, to a high level quantification of what the biodiversity loss would be in construction. And that then leads us on to think about how we can replace that through biodiversity net gain and comply with local planning authority targets, whether that's 10%, 30%, whatever that might be. This consultation process we're going through now is really important because it allows us to refine down what are a number of different route options down to a preferred route. Once we have that in the spring, following this consultation, we can then get out and do more detailed ecological assessments of each of the chosen sites, fully quantify what habitats there, what particular species they might support, and then go into a more detailed assessment of biodiversity loss, pre-biodiversity loss, and then go about biodiversity.
Okay. Alice, did you want to come in?
I just wanted to make a point on behalf of Save Our Lands and River that in all this discussion of shark locations, decanting, whatever that means, Gareth, football players, and tunnelling, that Save Our Lands and River object to the scheme in its entirety. We do not want the scheme to go ahead. So what I would like to, I also wish you were here to see the people in the room because it's rewarding to see the passion in the room. I'd like to call on you to respond to the idea of other schemes that will help us to get to drought resilience, including schemes that directly involve your customers, such as smart metering and usage of water. So we are here to say that we understand it's needed. We do not believe this scheme is environmentally, socially or financially sound, and we want to help you find an alternative.
Now, this is a fully online interactive experience this evening, and we have people watching in from home. Do we know if we have any Ham residents that have a question for us about Ham specifically? This question is, why not treat the sewage directly at Mogden to produce safe water rather than extracting and replacing? Not necessarily a Ham question, however, the one that's got the most thumbs up online. So, why not do that?
We have actually looked at that. So, Leonie's mentioned that there was a number of options that were looked at originally. We've got a scheme called the Mogden Water Recycling Scheme, which does pretty much that. It looks to treat the final effluent to a much higher degree, higher standard using reverse osmosis technology. The downside of that is that it requires much more space, so we would have a new site to house that reverse osmosis plant, but we would also need to then pipe final effluent to that site, treat it there, and then pump it back to discharge it either in the river or up towards reservoirs. So in terms of the environmental footprint, there is bigger environmental footprint. It's a lot more costly to do that scheme because of the much larger infrastructure requirements for it, and also it's quite energy inefficient in terms of its operational cost and operational carbon. So overall, when you look at a scheme like that, while it's a viable scheme, it doesn't come out as best value when you look at it in terms of cost, environmental, carbon, and engineering matrix.
Okay, so please, if there must be somebody that's got a Ham-related question. Excuse me, just a moment. I'm chairing this. So, is there a Ham question on this side? Are you a Ham resident, sir?
Sorry, hello, Emma Tolhurst. I live on Burnell Avenue, which is directly in front of the green that you plan Thames Water to build on for 3 to 4 years. We've already seen an impact on our area from people trying to sell their houses because this is now coming up as a scheme which will impact our housing. And it's not just Burnell Avenue, it's many roads of my neighbours and friends around Burnell Avenue. And it's a similar question, I guess, to the Morley Park group, who know the impact of the area and the social impact it will have on the build, which I think is estimated at the moment between 3 and 4 years. This is a green and open space which is used by many people who don't have gardens of their own, many young children who play cricket and football in front of our house. It is also a space for dog walkers. You've heard this story before. And I guess I'm totally overwhelmed being here and still hearing you say this is going ahead. When you know the impact and the feeling from residents, I've responded to all of the surveys, I have responded to all of the requests for creative ways to develop water and respond to water shortage. So I would like to ask, what do you think will be the social impact, the mental welfare impact on families living around the Burnell open space? Thank you.
Okay, that could be that's definitely a question for Thames. It may be something members of the panel wish to address as well.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful also to hear from members of the panel on that one as well. But Rob, I think it would be helpful in the first instance to set out the situation at Burnell Avenue.
Yeah, so I mean, just to clarify the information around kind of project phasing, project duration from the construction phase. So the total at this stage, we envisage the total construction period to be 3 to 3.5 years. So that's the entire project from Mogden, the pipeline, right down to the river. And obviously that will be done in phases. So we will not be on site in any particular location for that entire duration. Currently, we envisage the works down off Burnham Avenue for the intake and the outfall to span approximately 21 months. So I know it's still a significant amount of time, but it's not the kind of the 3 or 4 years that was originally suggested. As I set out in my kind of opening presentation, and I know it's frustrating, we are still at a really early stage and we haven't done the full assessment of environmental and social impacts. And so all we've done at the moment is just do things in terms of a high-level risk assessment of what we envisage the potential impacts could be, and appraise whether there would be mitigation measures that would be available to reduce and eliminate those impacts. And across London, there are lots of construction projects of a scale size where those projects have been able to mitigate things like noise, disruption from vehicle movements, lighting, air quality, etc. And we would envisage something very similar for this project. But until we get into the detail following EIA scoping in the new year, we can't obviously provide at this stage those concrete details around what the potential impacts would be, or what the potential mitigation measures might be. But also, I just want to reiterate that if, when we've done our work, we determine that there are still permanent significant effects as a result of our activities, then we will not get licenses and consents needed for the scheme, and the scheme will not go ahead. But we need to do the work first to understand what that potential is.
Thank you. Julia, and then Ian.
Thank you. If I've got the borough boundary more or less in the right place, you may well be a resident of Kingston Borough rather than Richmond Borough. I don't know precisely, you're Richmond. But nonetheless, I think the point stands that we know that some of our neighbours in Kingston are equally worried about this scheme, and I've spoken to some of the Kingston councillors about this as well, who are working hard to make sure they've got the knowledge to address and communicate their residents' concerns. I think it's also worth pointing out that our Assistant Director for Planning, our Chief Planning Officer, if you will, has been in touch with her counterpart in Kingston, as have the Chief Executives of the borough, so that we can make sure that we understand what each other are doing and what each other's concerns are in relation to the residents within both boroughs, because I think you spoke very powerfully about some of those social impacts, which is what I and others on the panel have been referring to as the uncalculated cost. And I think a welcome acknowledgement there from Thames Water that not all the costs have been accounted for in terms of the social value as well. So I think Paul had something to add about the process of...
Ian does. Ian, I've got other questions waiting, you see.
It was quite an important point about the landowning meetings to come, which relates really, which is just to stress that we won't be going into that landowning set of meetings saying, okay, it's a done deal, isn't it? And therefore, what are your mitigations for these awful construction sites? Well, let's pour through the work on that and see what we can do to mitigate all that. What we'll first of all be saying is exactly what you've all been thinking, why this scheme? Just need to stress that. We will be saying why this scheme. We will want to understand why this scheme, why we're having these conversations at all. And we want to understand, whether why we weren't given the opportunity to stress these landowning concerns at early doors before they landed this route. And we'll want that opportunity to describe all of our concerns across multiple sites now. All those social impact, leisure impact, they accumulate to be a huge set of issues, and we'll want to, kind of give Thames in effect the chance to think again about the basic option here.
Ian.
Sorry, I can't let the comment from my Thames colleagues go about repeating this notion of we're early in the scheme. So bear with me just for 30 seconds to give you the history. It won't be a speech, but we've found reference to this scheme back from 2008. Not by Thames Water, from the guy that dreamt it up. This scheme was rejected in 2019 when it was proposed to be 4 times the size at 300 megalitres. The Environment Agency stopped it at that point because they said it will warm up the river too much. So when I hear that in this process, for example, the point Emma makes about yeah, we haven't got to the social impact yet. They've had years on this. They've spent millions of pounds of your money. We are funding this work now. It's on your bill. And yet they haven't done enough to even do anything on the social impact. So that's first statement. The second one is about work going on at the moment. My understanding, my Thames colleagues can correct me if I'm wrong, they have been collecting water quality data for this programme for the past couple of years. So can they please publish it now?
Thanks. Would you be in a position to publish the water quality data to which has just been referred?
Yeah, scope as well. So, thanks, Ian. So the data we collected up to the latter half of 2022 is published. It's in our Gate 2 report available on the Thames Water website. There's a water quality appendix that has the sample locations and sample frequency and a lot of the data that we've collected. Yes, it's going to be, there's been an extra year's worth of data since we published that report. Our intention is to publish all our environmental data that we've collected as part of the scheme, not just water quality, but all the ecology work that we've been doing, alongside a lot of our environmental modelling that we've been undertaking. And the idea would be to publish that in the spring of next year as part of our EIA scoping report. So that's the plan at the moment. But I can certainly send you the link or provide you a link to the website where that water quality report is reporting the data up to the end of 2022.
Spring's quite big, about 3 months. Any chance of narrowing that down ever so slightly? Perhaps?
Sorry, narrowing what down? Sorry, of when we would provide the update report.
March, April? May?
Well, it comes back to what we were discussing earlier around which planning route we go. So we want to obviously understand and have confirmed our planning routes, even though we have a preference, as I said earlier, it's not our decision. We would then want to undertake EIA scoping with that by local authority. So for a little bit side, we hope come on with that one.
Thank you. Okay, where am I going to next? Where am I going to next? You're associated with a councillor on the council. You're a resident, but I'm trying to get residence views. Have you? Is it really good?
Hi, my name's Danielle Coleman and I live in Ham. I am a translator. I try not to make mistakes in my translations, but very rarely I do. If the agency goes back to me and says, could you correct this? I do so within 24 hours, let's say. We've heard a lot about increasing the supply, but we haven't heard very much about fixing your leaks. How can it possibly be a realistic target to take 27 years to fix half of your mistakes?
There we are.
I think it's really important to hear from Peter Blair in that one.
Yeah, so I guess I've got three things to maybe say in response to that.
Short things.
Firstly, so regardless of our existing leakage position, which we know that leakage is too high at the moment, we have got a duty to ensure a resilient supply of water, and we've got to have a robust plan that we can actually deliver. Otherwise, everybody across London will be at greater risk of drought events than they should be. Second, we referenced the 50% reduction by 2050, but we haven't yet mentioned that leakage will be reduced by 40% compared to that same baseline by 2030. So we're getting a really long way towards that 50% leakage target before Teddington DRA is due to be online, and the DRA is needed on top of our leakage reduction plan as well. And then after that, after we reach that sort of 40% reduction level, what is left to tackle leaks is very expensive, very disruptive mains rehabilitation efforts, which involves digging up pipes and replacing them. That sort of circa last 70 to 90 MLDs worth of leakage reduction will cost about £4 to £6 billion compared to sort of £250 million of capex for this scheme, and will take about 20 years.
Okay, thank you. Gentleman here.
Good evening. Name is Peter Elliott. I know absolutely nothing about this scheme. This is the first time I've heard of it. But I am totally unimpressed by both sides of the argument. Those against it seem to be doing nothing but scaremongering. Oh, I'm ever so worried. There's a tunnel going under my house. How will I live with it? They put the Elizabeth line through the centre of London with all the old buildings there, and nothing happened to any of them. Tunnelling is not a problem in this day and age, it's a matter of money. As for Thames Water, you come out with some awfully long words that go round and round and are totally incomprehensible. The lady, a representative, she should be a politician because she never gives a straight answer to anything, but she's very happy that the question was asked and that she heard the comments. My question is, where can I find out about the facts of the actual diameter of any tunnel, the length of any tunnel? If it's really £750 million the cost, there's no way you're going to do it in under 10 years, and probably 15.
Well, we can't say we're not balanced. So, where can the gentleman find out the details about the width or the size of the pipe and the length of the pipe? Or tunnel, or whatever you want to call it.
So, the gentleman's got access to the internet. He'll be able to see all of the scheme information available on our website. We have a dedicated website for the Teddington Direct River Abstraction Scheme. Apologies for the acronyms. But we also have hard copy materials, one of which I have in my hand. So if the gentleman doesn't have access to the internet, I'm grateful if you provide your mailing address to the organisers, and then we can send you the information. I mean, you can organise a meeting with one of our teams so that we can talk it through with you as well.
Okay. Either online or let us know your address. We'll get it sorted. But there have been other things where there have been hard copies in this very room, to be fair. I'm going to go to the back room, the lady here. Hello.
Hi. I'm from Friends of Hamlands. So Hamlands is a local nature reserve. It's a metropolitan open land. It has protected species living on it. And I can't understand how on earth you can be even considering mitigating this unique nature reserve if you upset some of the habitats and some of the areas on it.
Thank you. Do you wish to come back on that? The lady was exercising a concern about the fragile nature of hamlands, the biodiversity, the ecology, all of that, and how you can possibly even try to mitigate the impact of the works which will be happening?
Well, yeah, so we're very aware of the quality of habitat around hamlands. I've certainly come up in all of our screening that we've done to try and choose sites and avoid areas of particular sensitivity. Unfortunately, we do have constraints around where we can put sham sites and discharge and abstraction locations. But what we now need to do is really do more detailed assessments. We have a firm idea of the particular sites and location and exactly what habitats and ecology is present in any one of those sites we've identified. Because there will be geographic differences between sites. Get that kind of data, we can then look to try and avoid particular sensitivities, whether that spatially or temporally, and come to a refinement on the scheme so that it's less impactful on biodiversity.
Okay, thank you. Gentleman here.
Hi, my name is Andy Barton. I live in St Margaret's. Can I have a quick show of hands for the Thames people? Have you been to Moormead? You've all been to Moormead. I'm not a professional, you guys are. Just for some context, can you just, how many HGVs movements in a day? And there's only one route in and one route out, and that's single track. Is this, you're telling me as professionals that's the best choice?
Yeah. Okay, over to you. Yes, Thames, speak to us, please.
Sorry, there's feedback. Yes, so again, I don't know how much information you've seen, whether you've seen our consultation documents at all. We do recognise, we do understand that around Moormead and Banbury, the roads are very close linked. There's on-street parking, and it's very congested with cars. So, as part of our concept design, what we would look to do actually is try and avoid the whole road network around there. And so we would look to bring in a new access track across the corner of the park that kind of borders the tree line near the River Crane. So we'd come over the bridge and then cut across the park in that corner to our shaft site, try and with the sole aim of avoiding any HGVs going on the local roads. And in terms of the HGV numbers, again, it's part of the detail that we don't have yet. We know approximately the total number of HGVs for the whole project. Some aspects are still to be understood and worked out. So in terms of shaft construction, some of the shafts will be drive shafts, that's where the tunnel boring machine will drive from, and some shafts will be reception shafts, that's where the tunnel boring machine is received. Material will only be excavated from the drive shaft, it won't be excavated from the reception shaft. And part of the work we need to do next year is understand, once we've got our confirmed route corridor, we know where our preferred shaft locations are, work out logistics and phasing programs to work out which shaft will be a drive shaft and which shaft will be a reception shaft. And that will then dictate the amount of HGV traffic that is required.
Okay, one comment which I just picked up in the room is that people are concerned that no structural assessment has been made of the bridge, which may need to be strengthened or replaced. Have you given any thought to that?
We have. You're right, there is work that we would need to do to satisfy ourselves that that bridge can take the access trucks and any HGVs that do need to come over it. As part of a potential mitigation plan, we may actually bridge that bridge, so we would build a temporary bridge over it, so that the weight from any vehicle movement doesn't actually impact on the bridge, so there'll be a temporary bridge over the top of it. Again, that's something that's commonly done where there are weak bridges around the country. So we're confident that once we've done the structural assessment, if we need to do that, that would be something that we bring into the final project.
The suggestion is sooner rather than later, I think, is what we're being told. Here we go.
Hi there. Just like to clarify some numbers, so hopefully not too much wriggle room on this one. At the beginning, I think Rob from Thames said that, and we've heard about the duty of care that Thames have got about resilience of water supply, but the scheme was going to be used, I think, between July and October, once every 2 years, and we're talking about 75 megalitres a day. Ian then said that it's going to be ticking over 25% capacity 24/7. What's the facts? And if it is 25% 24/7, why did you lead saying it was going to be used once every 2 years? Because that's kind of not really the truth.
Well, there we are.
We're both right. So the scheme would be operational in terms of it would abstract water from the River Thames, typically once every 2 years between July and October, and that provides obviously the deployable output for our network. So that helps fill the reservoirs so that when utility comes on, water is there. What we need to also do, though, ensure that when the scheme is required during that period, we can get a scheme quickly and turn that on. So part of the wider operation of the scheme, tertiary treatment plant, whose treatment works, would need to operate a maintenance mode at this stage to improve the technology.
Rob, you're breaking up ever so slightly. There we go.
Is viable and alive. It's a biological process. We would need to put a sweetening flow through that of up to 25%, which is what Ian suggested. What we don't know yet, and we are developing the design now, is where that recycled water that's produced through the tertiary treatment plant then ends up. At the moment, we are thinking that actually we put it back into the final effluent channel that will be discharged into the Thames estuary as it currently is at the moment, and that provides some benefits to the Thames estuary in that it improves the water, it will improve the water quality there. There may be a smaller, much smaller flow going through the pipework to Teddington, but we're still working on that design. Certainly, the state is not going to be up to 25%. If it's anything, it might be 1 or 2 megas a day. But we are, as I say, we are exploring what actually, what part of that basic flow goes through the pipework, and if we are able to drain down the pipe and leave it dry for a year or two, then absolutely that's something that we're looking at. So again, just to reiterate, it's the tertiary treatment plant requires that 25%, and that flow, a large part of that flow will go next time way anyway.
Thank you. We have time, I think, for 2 more questions. I'm going to go to this lady here, and then we're going to go finally to the online audience. So here we go.
Can you hear me? Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not the youngest person in the room. I might well be the oldest. And I've been looking at Moormead for the last 50 years, during which time we've had to make safety for children going across the road. The schools use that park every single day because the Stevens doesn't have a playground anymore. So it's not just leisure that we're thinking about, it's actually those children having all day, every school day use of that field. I think somebody needs to come and watch what happens on Moormead every day of the year, sun or rain. I think that's really important for you to come and see.
Thames, you say you've been. I mean, I've also heard in other parts of the borough that time-lapse cameras have been used to gauge movements in open spaces with the appropriate safeguards, checks, balances, all of that. Do you think that's something you might be able to commit to?
I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, we fully acknowledge the fact that the park is used a lot. I think it's important to bear in mind two things. One, we're absolutely not saying that we would take over the whole park, so we are only looking at a small portion of the park. So a lot of the activities that would happen can still happen. We are sensitive to how the park is used, and again, working with the local community and local groups and schools as we develop our design will be critical to trying to minimise those impacts. We do have opportunities to phase the works, potentially out of school in the school holidays or middle of winter. There are options that we can consider and will consider. Yeah, so and I think as we work through early next year to scope the EIA, we will scope the environmental surveys that then obviously inform the assessment and then the mitigation and reprovisioning. I think the last thing I want to add from academic implementation is regardless of the location, whether it's Newmead or down on Hamland, we are absolutely committed to providing a long-lasting positive benefit from developing the scheme. So whether that's absolutely the game, particularly in the Orly area where the site borders a crane, often not tree line, there's now opportunities to do some restoration in that area, connect the recreational grounds in space with the river again, whether it's down in Hamland, and where you potentially still get the benefits for people using the river itself.
Thank you. You really broke up just at the end there. Any chance we could just hear that last couple of sentences again? If somebody could turn the mic off, because that usually helps when Rob's talking. It turns into a Norman Collier tribute act otherwise. One for the teenagers there.
So I didn't quite catch that, but I think you said just repeat the last
yes,
sentence.
Please.
So it was just in general about, again, we want to work with everyone to try and identify positive legacies, whether that's biodiversity net gain or other physical measures, potentially people using the river, providing some long-lasting benefits as a result of the project.
Can I just say something out, Gareth? There is no way that the park cannot be closed. If anyone has looked at all the site plans, it is a preposterous. I mean, it's mad, right? There is no way that the park cannot be closed with children in the park. It's just, there's no way.
I consider it a hallmark of a well-chaired meeting that was the first time somebody jumped up and shouted that. So the last question for you, you'll be glad to know. So this is from online. You may answer yes, you may answer no. Will Thames Water please pledge to give the community campaign a donation of £50,000 to fund their ability to put forward a case at this stage of the application? Bearing in mind what my previous comments about the mic cutting out. Listen, I'll leave that to you. What do you say?
So, in terms of us pledging £50,000 to a campaign, I'm not sure how realistic that is, but one of the things that we are absolutely committed to is working with the communities throughout the development of this project. We've been, we've held, just recently in the last few weeks, we've had 4 sessions where we've been in the community. My team are out and about talking to people all of the time, and that level of activity will increase. We're looking to grow the size of the team so that we can get around and speak to everybody. For those of you who might be directly impacted by the scheme, we'd ask you to get in contact with us so that we can have that conversation. Community engagement is a huge part of this process, and whether it goes by local town and country planning, all via development consent order process. It's a huge part of the process that we need to go through and ultimately end up with a scheme that has been thoroughly tested within with the community, and that we can demonstrate that we've made changes as a result of that process. That we thank everybody who's joined either in the room tonight or on purpose online. You know, we really you know, appreciate that level of involvement in the scheme. And again, we thank everybody that's responded to the consultation already. We'd ask you to keep those responses coming in. It is a huge part of the process, and just thank you for inviting us to be part of the conversation this evening.
Not at all, thank you. Okay, I can see that people are already raring to go. I don't know, is it Love Island on this evening or something? So thank you very much for all of you for coming along and for taking part. Thank you very much to the panel for their contributions. Thank you very much to Thames Water. To our MP, Munira Wilson, to the various councillors dotted around, but as always, as chiefly yourselves. Thank you very much. Good night.